Hello, my name is Martin Ewen, and I've been a clown for quite some time. Um, that'll do.
Yeah. And so what brings you to you in Wellington now? Am I correct in that? In New Zealand?
I'm in Wellington, New Zealand, in a small room on top of a hill.
So what brings a clown to this place?
I'm 2 years ago, I was in Hawaii living in a builder's hut with a part-time job, and I found it increasingly difficult to eat anything. And so rather than go to the doctor, I went to a sports shop and looked at all the labels and bought the best protein drinks that you could buy and lived off those for 6 months until I started throwing that up as well. And then I thought, fuck it, I better go to the doctor. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you've got stage 4 cancer of the esophagus. It's a very rare type you have, which made me feel really good because, rare. But then the next sentence is like, but 52% of people die during the first year of contracting this. And I'm like, oh, well, I've already had it for 6 months, so that's not much good. And so I told a couple of people that I was dying because it seemed to be, news. And Nicholas said, oh, you should go to New Zealand and let your parents touch you before you die. And I said, is that a thing? And he said, yeah, that's a thing, because I'm a bit of a sociopath. I don't really know what the things are. And so then I'd been isolating pretty badly for about 10 years, and I went back onto the PNet Facebook thing and said, hello everybody, I'm dying now. And I've been watching people die online for about, since the internet began, and I've noticed everyone comes out of the woodwork and shares stories and all that shit. Can I have all my stories now, please? And that was fucking great, because all these people just piled on and shared story, and I had like a living wake, which was fantastic. And also I've got a huge debt of gratitude to the PNet community, because people just started throwing money at me as well, like for an airfare to get back to New Zealand. And I ended up with an airfare plus heaps. And I'm like, I'm dying, but I'm rich. And so I flew back here. I turned down, they were going to I'd lost so much weight and I didn't have a lot to begin with. And so I was under 120 pounds. And I came back.
You're quite a tall chap, aren't you?
No, not really. I'm about 5'9".
That's still very, very light for the height, isn't it?
And
sorry.
Yeah, I got back here, and my brother took me to his doctor the day after I arrived. And she just got on the phone, and she's looking at me. She's on the phone, and she's going, yep. And they just threw me into the system here, and I had an exploratory operation where they took photos of my liver. And the doctor was really impressed with my liver because it's got a racing stripe on it. And he'd never seen a liver with the racing stripe on it before. He didn't call it a racing stripe, but he grinned and showed me a picture of my liver, and it's got this racing stripe of fat across it. And I said, oh, does that mean it's marbled? Because I know that that's really bad. And he said, no, it's not marble. You've just got a strip on the outside. And so I wasn't as impressed with that as I should have been, really, because he was looking at my cancer of the esophagus. So let's talk about that, you fucker, instead of how impressive my liver is, because that's kind of redundant. But and I had a. Most people are grateful with their doctors, but I had a comically acrimonious relationship with him, I suppose, and which was good because he was British and he wore pinstripe suits and stuff, and I just took the piss because I've got a Brooks Brothers suit. I'm wearing it now, and then they gave me chemo for a couple of months, and all my hair fell out. And every 2 weeks, I'd have to go into a little room, and someone would come in and tell me whether I had come to the fork or not. And the fork was, one side was you're going forward and you're going to get operated on, and the other side was we're putting you into palliative care, you're fucked. And so I had to sit in this room and just wait for this person to come in and tell me what my future was. And that happened like 4 different times. And they'd come in and just chat to me, and I'm just like, you fuckers, you have no idea.
And how are you feeling then?
Very anxious. You have no idea. I mean, everyone dies once. So everyone's going to go through what I've already gone through. I get to go through it twice, at least. The first thing you do is you try to contextualize it. Like, I immediately Googled how many people die a day in the world. And then you realize that everyone does this. This happens to everybody. And then also on my first day of visiting the doctor, I said, oh, look, I'm starting, I don't know if it's psychosomatic, but I'm starting to feel pain in my stomach. And she's like, oh, that's no problem. Here's some synthetic morphine, and I can get you the real stuff if you want it. And so I had a hit of that night, and then I'm like, oh, this death shit's great. Like, as everyone in the developed world dies in a fog of morphine anyway. I mean, that's how you're going to die. If you're lucky enough to be in a hospital or in some sort of process, as long as you're not kinetically killed by a truck or a bus or something, then you're going to die in a fog of morphine. So it's not that bad. Like, it's not. There are worse things, and I've learned.
Did you feel fear
of death? No, because I've been depressed most of my life. So, it's not. I'm not pining for the fjords, you know. I'm not. I won't miss much. There'll be some people, but there's always some people, and I mean, I'm dealing with that shit now. Like, my birthday was last week. A good friend of mine sat on a hill and overdosed on my birthday down in Christchurch, and I'm like, oh fuck. And then 2 days ago, I found out that a good friend of mine who was a clown, didn't die the way it was advertised, but he actually hung himself in a bathroom. And I'm like, oh fuck, that was a blow as well. It was like he died all over again.
Well, that's a common thing. We have a friend here in the UK who died from a similar way, and because of the children and because of the family, it was never shared, and it was only a few people who found out in the end. It's almost like a double blow, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. And some people do. Sometimes it's for the insurance that they say, oh no, he was just cleaning his gun. But then I did the chemo. My hair fell out. That's where I got the cover for that second book from, because all my hair came out, and I'm like, why? I should put my face makeup right over my head. That'd look cool. And
it's a great picture.
I did that, and David Aitken produced a beer for me, and I'm like, what a life! 2 books and a beer, brilliant. I can die now. And then
obviously you didn't. So what happened with that?
I didn't. No, so then I went into hospital for this fucking major operation. They take a chunk out of your rib at the back and prise it open so that they can put all the equipment in, and then they deflate a lung, which gives them a lot more room. And then it's 8.5 hours, and they go in and they take your esophagus out. They cut your throat from the inside, basically, and then they cut 2/3 of your stomach out, and then they sew it all together, and then they come back out. So then I was in intensive care. Then I was a couple of months in hospital. The doctor said that in his experience, no one had ever healed as fast as I had, because I'm just good like that. Which I push it too, because I have had a reputation for being kind of a physical nihilist. Like I fucking blackout drank all the time. I wet myself on so many kind people's couches, and and I'd wake up in alleys, and I'd I don't know, I just abused myself pretty badly, and now I literally don't have the fucking stomach for it. So so then I got out of hospital and I went back to my brother's place, and my brother's got a beautiful house overlooking the sea. But then I got kind of survivor's guilt, because I'm like, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I can't stay at my brother's because he's been really kind, and I haven't died. So that must be really upsetting.
Did you feel an extra weight of doing things with the time you have now? Like it's a gift, the extra time you have?
No, I'm not that romantic, to be honest.
Fair enough.
No, what I did instead was I found the cheapest place to live in Wellington, which is an old nurses' hostel on top of this hill. I've got the airport on one side and the zoo on the other, and it's about 30 people live here, and I moved into here, and I was feeding myself through a tube, and I just feed myself at night. I plug myself in and just go to sleep, and this pump would give me 3,000 calories of whatever into my esophagus. And then while that was happening, because of the generosity, I had money in my bank account, and I flew to Perth, to the Perth Festival, just because there's a place in my heart for Perth, and I wanted to see some street performance, and then I came back here, and then I've been a shut-in for about 1.5 years. It's just been surreal. I've been on a benefit. I don't leave my room much, and it's hilarious because I've just been a depressed shut-in, and now the world's all kind of joined me.
Yeah.
And now it's not cool anymore because everyone's doing it. And
so now you want to get out?
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit invigorated now, because I'm like, you plebs, I've been doing it for ages. Like I've got it down,
So you've recovered. You're here now. Let's go back to the beginning if we can. How did you become a performer? What was your first experiences? What drove you into entertaining?
Well, technically, what drove me into entertaining is what drives everyone into entertaining, which is a huge internal maw that's empty, that can only be filled by the love of strangers. But technically, I went to clown school in 1983. I got permission from my probation officer, and because I got in a little bit of trouble, because I've always been impulsive and naughty, and like people now would call it
ADHD.
Yeah.
Attention hyperactive deficit disorder.
Yeah, there's that, and then I've also got a bit of defiance disorder. But back then, it was just called being selfish and irresponsible,
Yes.
Which there's a lot of truth in as well. But I had gone to a party, and it was doctors and nurses, and I was a sound technician. No, I was a lighting technician for a band, because it was the same as being an altar boy, which I'd been as well. Only it wasn't a mass, it was a band, and it wasn't candles, it was lights. And plus you got to stand behind a thing and look really important and change the colours. And we got invited to this party after a gig, and it was all doctors and nurses, and I found them insufferably boring. But the lead singer thought he had a chance with this nurse, and I kept walking up to him and going, "Can we go? Can we just go?" And he's like, "No, oh, in a minute. And I knew that there was a community hall about 2 blocks away, because we'd played there a few weeks past. So I left and I went there, and I booted the door in, and I stole a fucking huge fire extinguisher. And then I came back to the party and I knocked on the door, and the doctor whose party it was opened the door, and I just covered him in foam. And then I walked past him and went up to my friend and said, "Can we leave now?"
Yeah.
And they 6 months later, they busted me for that. And so I got probation. And then I got permission from my probation officer to go from Dunedin up to Auckland and go to this clown school. And it was, I had done actually, I hadn't done much. I'd done some clown stuff. In that earlier interview, I told the story about robbing the bank as a clown. I'd done that stuff, but this gave me much needed structure. It was 3 months. The first month was clown character development. The second and third month was furthering that, and also the deconstructing what a street show was, in terms of broadly how to create an audience, how to create a stage in public, how to create an audience in public, how to do a show with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and how to ask for money afterwards. And we would go, and there were 12 of us, and we would do separate exercises, one after another, like just how to create a stage in public. We'd just each do that, and then we'd do how to create a audience in public, and you just get an audience, and then you just bow and leave them, and they just walk away.
It's learning through play rather than learning through a textbook and saying, study this person.
Oh yeah, it was very hands-on. Like at the end of it, we had shows, and I had a clown called Vernon Vortex, and who wore a baby's bonnet and was quite philosophical, and who talked. And I had how to create a near-death experience, and I sold another show I sold isolation chambers, and crawled inside one as part of the show. And I just did a lot of weird stuff, and nothing failed. Or everything failed to the same degree, and I mistook that for success, one or the other. I can remember resuscitating a fish at one gig, which was terrible because the fish was fucking rotten. and I juggled squid because
And was this on the stage? Or
sorry.
was this on the stage and you were doing cabarets, or was this on the street? Or
This was street. Sometimes I
wow,
do it. Sometimes I do it on stage, but I mean, I had a thing on stage I did where I killed God, which was really funny. And I'd come out, between pretty hardcore bands and just talk about my relationship with God, and then I'd end up quoting bits of Deuteronomy, and then killing God, and then everyone loved that, and then because I just have this thing where I'd have a conversation, and then I said, and then he said, and then I said, and then it finishes with, and then I killed him, and everyone just like, ah.
and so it seems like quite an intense time for writing. You're producing a huge amount in the first years of your performances.
Yeah, well, I was, what happened at the end of the time was that the teacher asked four of us whether we wanted to form a group, and so we did. And so for 2 years we worked as a troupe, and so that taught me more about the creative process, and I was also working as an adjunct to that on my own as a street performer, and we toured the country a couple of times, and then I just lost it. The depression got the best of me, and I stopped performing, and because I couldn't see a future. There wasn't any.
Was the reasoning behind that, or was it just the black veil?
No, well, it's a bit of everything, but the New Zealand's a really tough place to earn a living as a street performer.
Why is that?
And back then, even more so, because like in Europe, and this is why when you go to Europe, it's just like, oh my God, the fucking relief. It's just, and the audiences in Europe look at a street performer and they don't go, what is he doing? They go, I wonder if this has any quality, because they already know what you're doing.
Yes.
New Zealanders and Australians at that time would look at you and go, what is he doing? And then the next question they'd ask themselves is, why is he doing it? And you have to get through that before you can get to the participation thing, because it's a.
So is there a thing of them looking at you? Is there a thing of them looking? So when you're looked as in Europe, maybe they look at you as someone who's entertaining, playing a mental person, whereas in New Zealand, maybe they looked at you as someone who's a mental person who is entertaining.
They've just got no cultural. They had no cultural context. It was just like, what's this? They had nowhere to put you in their mind. They're just like madness.
And how do you get over that then?
Well, you have to entertain them. You have to tickle their psyche to be able to arrest them. There's degrees to this, in my opinion, anyway, that have got to do with old psychology, old coming out of the trees, serpent brain stuff.
I believe I have a phrase written down that I heard you say in a previous interview: curious ape syndrome.
Yeah, the curious ape syndrome is we used to, unusual things used to kill us.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Rustle in the bushes is the tiger.
Yeah. Rustle in the bushes, here's the tiger. Things would usually eat us, and so you got fight or flight, but you've also got freeze, and you can, if you do something that doesn't make sense on a very simple level. If you take 3 activities and chop them up into segments and then just mishmash those movements so that they don't make sense, then you arrest people. People will keep looking at you until they can work out some context. And then when they've worked out the context, they choose whether to stay there because the context is attractive to them, or leave now that they've judged your context and you're no longer a potential danger, and they can just write you off as a silly person, whatever. And so you use that as a crowd building technique. And you can also use that as a defensive technique. If you do it really quickly, if someone comes up in your face and you do that, if you do a whole series of actions and they're concise and they seem to make sense but they don't, you can do that for 10 seconds and then you can turn around and walk. That person will stay there for at least 5 seconds, still with their brain just trying to work out what the fuck you...
Completely fucked up the protocol.
Yeah, and then you're out. You're out of the danger zone. It's a defense mechanism. But the concept of street theatre, in terms of it being, you're creating a congregation of people, and they lose their individualism gratefully at some point, if you're lucky, and they become a mass of people, and they're comfortable in that mass, and they're laughing, and they look to each other while they're doing it because, oh, look, they're laughing too. We're all laughing, and it just becomes something greater than the sum of its parts for me.
Well, maybe that word, you said you're creating a congregation, so maybe it's a communion. That's the sense of feeling.
Yeah, but I've got to watch out. I've got to watch out because I've got a lot of Catholic residue because that was the way I was brought up. But it does apply. You know, it is a massive sort, but it's a subconscious one. And you know, I've always been afflicted by or gifted by a kind of hypervigilance. I had pretty mundane shattering when I was about 3, and
what do you mean by shattering?
I went from one household to the other when I was 3, and I went from a nice, comfortable place to a relatively uncomfortable place, and I didn't know that. I have no memory of it, but it happened, and it explains a lot. And I never bonded properly with the new people, and I never trusted anything. I just didn't trust anybody, and I didn't trust anything. And I was hypervigilant. I could read people really quickly to figure out whether they were a threat or not. And I was pretty lippy and pretty fast and sharp, and I could use humor to basically get through life. And you know, plus I was naughty, and I was fun as long as you weren't me, you know. And so I've strayed. Oh yeah.
So no, we were in Europe
in terms of the congregation. Yeah. So you know, in terms of what God might be, to me, the only thing that I have ever really trusted is laughter. Like, laughter is, you know, apart from like other people's laughter. Like when someone's laughing, they're not consciously laughing. You don't consciously laugh. Like, you have to get through so many layers to push that button to make someone involuntarily brave, It's a ridiculous thing to make someone do. But I kind of trust that. And when it happens, when you can get a lot of people to do it, that's like brilliant. That's like, there's no better thing for me. It's my drug of choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also a passive aggressive thing in there too, because I've had little old ladies down on one knee with the mascara running off their faces, and I'm just like, suffer, bitch. and you know, you'd time it so you'd go boom, and then they'd laugh, and then it was up to you to let them have a breath or not. And sometimes when you're feeling mean, you're like, not today. And just as they're coming down, you boom, you hit them with another one, and then just as and you just exhaust them. It's just you can see them, they're suffering, and you're just like, wow, you know.
So just to pull the story back into chronology. So you've left New Zealand. You're in Europe.
Oh no, I haven't left New Zealand yet.
Okay.
Last you saw Martin, he was depressed. Yeah, so I wasn't doing anything. I was also heartbroken. I go into these spiraling heartbroken things when when I finally exhaust people. And I am exhausting. But my good friend Rob McLaren was in a stilt theatre group, and they were called Stalker, and I hated them. I hated a lot of things. Mostly I just pretended to hate them, but it was just better that way for me. Like, I hated jugglers. I thought they were symmetrical epileptics, but you know, clowns are the lowest status things in the social order typically. So I just have to. But that gives them so much elasticity. And I didn't like these stilt people because they took themselves really seriously, and they knew that they were intimidating, and they kind of played up to that. And I'm just like, oh. And anyway, then I was invited to join them. And so I went. I was depressed, and so I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. Because my friend Rob was in there, and I'm like, well, I'll hang out with my friend, that'll be cool. And so I worked with him for 2 years and got some serious stilt chops in that period of time. Because one side effect of New Zealand and Australia to some extent is that we know that we're at the arse end of the universe. It's just a given. Like, every book we ever read as a child was published in London, far, far away. And so when we do things, we try to play catch up, because in our minds, the rest of the world's just superior. And what happened is we just worked on our stilt skills so hard that by the time I started traveling, and ever since, I'm just like, technically, we're the best that there was, you know. We reinvented the whole stilt thing. We didn't make stilts symmetrically. We made them to fit ourselves. You would do this fitting process where you just stand on a piece of newspaper in a neutral stance and do a outline, and then you'd make the stilts so that we could transfer our natural stances and gaits to our stilts, and no one else was doing that. And which allows me now still, I mean, I can mimic other people's walks. I'm not my what are they called? Oh, they're just called stilts. Apparatus. My apparatus designed for me. They adapt to me. I don't have to adapt to them. We were the first people to do that. So then I did 2 years of that, and while I was doing that, we toured nationally a couple of times, and I would select cast members, and we would do. I was created this theatre group called Anti-Gravity Theatre, which has gone through about 3 iterations of various cast members and stuff. And we would do the opening act. So we'd still do all this clown stuff, and then we'd do this dark stilt dance, highly physical stuff afterwards with a band. And so I was still doing clown stuff while that happened. And then we kind of fell apart as a group. And then Rob went off to Japan. And then I got depressed again. And then he sent me a letter because the internet wasn't invented and said, I'm starting to get some work over here. I could really use your skills as a negotiator, because I'm a pretty good negotiator. I can't negotiate for myself so well. I do, and I'm better at it now, but I can negotiate for other people really well because I can see both strengths and weaknesses of the people involved, and I can play those against each other to get 2 mutually beneficial outcomes. So both people are happy. I can do that really well.
So you play as much of a mediator as a negotiator.
Yeah, and I was in fact a mediator for the Actors Equity at one point. And so then I didn't have any money, and there was this old American guy who I had taken on a magic mushroom safari, and he lived up in Auckland, and I went to visit him, and he goes, "What do you do? So what are you up to?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to Japan next week." And he's like, "Oh, that's great!" Like, blah, 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 blah. And then we talked for a bit more, and then I said, "Oh, you know that thing about going to Japan next week?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I went, "I need an airfare." And he just looked at me and he just went, "All right." And he signed a check and gave me an airfare. So, I mean, I'm grateful to so many people who have been so kind to me in my life, because I'm such a chancer, and I don't have the discipline, and I'm not responsible enough to get a lot of things that normal people could do done. But I do, and I've got I've got dependency issues, like chemically, but also psychologically. Like,
well, they're like that, aren't they? These 2 things.
I can be super independent, going around the world doing my shit, and I would jump from place to place because I had the street theatre community, and then I had the clown community as well, like international whatever clown thing, and then I'd go off and do ridiculous solo gigs, simply because when the internet first started, I had a black and white. I had a black and white website. I was a sardonic, disdainful pantomime. I'm quite articulate, and people would come across that and go, "Oh, this looks interesting. This guy looks like," so I'd get invited to do these silly things that other people might not have got. Like, I'd be in a squat.
Got any examples?
Yeah, I was in a squat in London, and I got hit up by someone in Chicago saying, "Oh, do you do private parties?" And then the dance begins, and I love the dance as well. It's just like, I'm insane, but I'm in control and capable at the same time, which is, that's what it is. And so I go, yeah, I've done retired starlets' 21st birthday parties in Japan. which I'd done, and he's like, "Oh, okay, so I've got a private party. James Brown will be performing, and Aretha Franklin and a 200-strong choir are performing.
Wow.
And what do you cost?"
So I take it this person was fairly wealthy, then I'm assuming this is astronomical costs for a venue, isn't it? For acts.
Yeah. Super wealthy. And it was at the Aragon Ballroom, which is a cultural institution in America. It's where the radio used to come out of. They used to have big orchestras in there, and it was kind of Al Capone designed with a polished wooden floor, and the inside looks like an Italian village. And so they flew me over there, and I did that gig, and then what other ridiculous things have I done?
Well, before we go on to this, can we just get the chronology of it? So you've gone to in the story we're in Japan now, yes? We're flying to Japan.
I've gone to Japan, and Bob McLaren, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Bob.
He had met this viciously carnivorous snake of a man, who was a Japanese businessman, who had started their relationship with, "You work with me, I give you T-shirt every day." and Rob, because he's unique, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Different T-shirt." And and the guy goes, "No, same T-shirt."
He's a hard bargainer.
So anyway, I turn up, and I gave myself 3 or 4 months to work this guy, and we got up to like $500 a day, just because I played the game.
T-shirts?
No, cash. And then I negotiated exclusive contracts, where they gave us accommodation. Like, we had a flat in Harajuku, which is basically just the coolest epicenter place of. No one can afford to live there, but we did. We had a flat in the middle of Harajuku. How cool was that? And I say it was a flat. It was a storage room, but it had a shower. And then we also had a place above a radio station. And so we'd be radio DJs during the week, and then go and make $1,000 every weekend. But we could make more.
You're doing stilt work?
Yeah.
What kind of work are you presenting there? So is
I
it with the clown?
I had a dance piece, a comic dance piece.
Is this similar to the clown that people know of you now with? The lurk, is it? The clown you perform with now?
Yeah. It was the beginnings of it. It was okay. I had a 3.5-minute dance piece, but I'd be slotted in 20-minute sections, and so I just play for 15 minutes and then just use the dance piece as punctuation. And on the street, I just go bam. I just go 3.5 minutes, bam, $100. 3.5 minutes, bam, $100.
So you're literally building, releasing.
Yeah, it's Japan. No one had worked in Japan. We were like the first people. Rob was probably one of the first 3 people to do street theatre in Japan.
What year is this? Do you know?
This is probably 88.
So it's quite late. The street performance found its way there.
Yeah, basically between 85 and 95 was the great safari decade, where countries that it had never had, people would go and do it. Like Nick Nicholas did Norway, and he was like the first person to do Norway, and it was just brilliant. You just killed for a summer. You just, it was Nick Nicholas and a handful of other people. and they all just camped somewhere by a lake and just went into town and worked every day. So yeah, I did Japan, and then I left Japan under a cloud of shame because my boss, the same evil
T-shirt
person,
guy.
Matsumoto, his name was Matsumoto. He had tried to renegotiate a gig the night before the gig, and he's like, "I don't want to pay you 500. I want to pay you 400." And I'm like, "You realize I can just go out in the street and make 1,000, and I don't have to get up early, and I don't have to catch a plane, and I don't have to do anything." Um, and he goes, "But I won't. I'll make a lot if I pay you 500." And I'm like, "You should be embarrassed at at, at your ability to be a businessman if you can't make a profit, don't you think? And why do you think not making a profit is my problem?" And plus, Rob had already socially engineered, because Rob speaks 3 different kinds of Japanese. Rob had already socially engineered the passwords to the computers in the office, and we'd had a good gander at the economics of the situation. And we knew that he was charging us out at $3,000 a day, and he was paying us
Wow.
and he was paying 500. But that was cool. We were cool with that because he was getting, he was having to maybe pay for the flights and whatever.
And in the end, everyone's got to make bread.
And so he tried to do this game, and I'm just like, I'm not playing this game. And then he goes, "Oh, right, I'll pay you the 500." And then I was so pleased with myself as a negotiator that I got stupendously drunk and I slept in and didn't do the gig at all the next day.
Oh.
And so then I go to Harajuku to do a street show to make my $500 for the day. And who should walk past after my show but my boss, who has been horribly humiliated and lost a lot of face and lost a lot of money, and he had to send 2 people to replace me and all that. And he walks up to me and I'm sitting down, and he sits down next to me and he goes, "Can I hit you in the head?" and I go, and I think about it, and then I go, no, you can't hit me in the head. And he goes, like this. And then I wait a couple of days and I go to the office and I go, "Look, I know I've done a really bad thing, and this is what I'm going to do. Here's the 500. I know it's only a token, but it's my token. And now I'm going to leave the country because I'm ashamed. But I'll work for you if you ever need me to again." And that's what I did. It was okay because the emperor was dying and all the gigs were cancelled anyway, so it's not a biggie. And then so I went to Australia and I was working in Australia, and then I get this message that this Japanese guy wants you to ring him up. And so I ring him up and he goes, "You must come here now." And I go, and this is like 6 months later. And I know he's fucked up. I know that someone else has just done what I've done, and only not the day before, a week before. And he wants and he desperately needs someone to fill in. That's why he's.
And I suppose in terms of your skill set, it's not a common thing. It's not something you can just go in a phone book and call up like this,
Yeah, because he got me. I did work really good gigs. Like I was a corporate whore. Like I do Suntory, Panasonic, Wayno department stores. I worked for Coca-Cola at the World Expo in Osaka.
Coca-Cola, they're a nice moral company.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a slut. Like I've worked for Camel cigarettes.
See, but it surprises me because you seem like you're quite a moral person. You have quite a depth of thought about the world and the mechanisms of it. I would expect you to be, carry on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, you're right. I am a very holy person, but I would do these things, and I'd rationalize it that I'm doing it because I'll write about it, and it's just like as a cautionary tale. Like when I worked in Vegas for Camel Cigarettes, and with Run DMC and Ron Jeremy, who's a porn star.
I have heard of him. Yeah.
And that's one of my better stories because that was just fucking sick, that gig. But yeah, so the Japanese guy rings me up and he goes, "You must come here now." And I do the Japanese thing where they don't. You never say no in Japanese negotiating. You suck air through your teeth. You go like this, and then you go, "This could be very difficult," which means absolutely not. In Japanese, it means absolutely not. Fuck off.
What would happen if you say no? Is it rude?
Yeah, it's just rude. It's just rude. So he goes, "You must come here now," and I go, "This might be very difficult." And the next thing out of his mouth is, "What is your bank account number?" And so I go, "Chotomoto kudasai," which means just a moment in Japanese. And then I read out my bank account number, and he puts like $3,000 in within an hour and a half. And I'm just like, "Guess I'm going to Japan again." And I actually spent so much money binging that I didn't have enough for the airfare within about 3 days. And I had to. No, it's ridiculous. Like I got 1 foot long hair extensions that cost $500 from the grooviest place in Sydney that did hair. I just ran amok. But then I made enough money to catch the plane, and I went back. So I did Japan on and off for like 3 years, and then I had a choice because I noticed that anyone who worked any length of time in Japan became plastic, like eventually.
What do you mean?
Well, if you do it's because what the Japanese expectation of entertainment is. If you just do these cute things and throw away lines, and gradually you just become smoother and smoother and smoother, and then it's
so you mean plastic's like commercial kind of thing? You lose your edge.
Just soulless. You're just soulless. There's no fucking art in it. You're not. The money's good, and you just get sucked into it. And I had a phrase for it. I can't remember what the phrase was, but it'll probably pop in later on. But yeah, I was watching other performers, and they were, they have these tips of, "Oh yeah, you've got to." They like it if you paint your juggling things white, and they're like, they just. Oh, that's right. I've remembered what it is. I didn't want to get eaten by the cheese monster. All their shows would just get cheesier and cheesier and cheesier, and
homogenized.
I didn't want to get eaten by the cheese monster, and so I did all these gigs. Saved for the first time in my life. I saved some money, so like I had $10,000, which to me is an enormous amount of money, and then I went to. I'm like, time for a change, and I went to Thailand where I experimented with the concept of boredom for a month and a half. I went to an island, Koh Samui, I think, and just lived on I stayed at a nice little hut, but lived on a beach, did nothing, and then just after a month, I'm like, yep, this is it. This is boredom. This is what it feels like. Enjoy it. And then I went into Bangkok and got another 2 weeks just to be sure. And then I went back to the beach. And then I'm
So
like,
it didn't
yep.
suit you? Did
Yeah,
it suit
because
you?
I'm like,
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it, but I got bored. And that's what I wanted to find out, was that I wanted to find out where my boredom threshold was. Because later on, I knew I might want to just escape. And I wanted to be able to remember that you can't escape. Like,
Is it just boredom, or is there a drive for something else, to contact people, to be able to communicate, to be able to express yourself, or is it just wanting to be active?
well, the thing I learned was that you can't escape yourself. And another thing that I have learned generally is I don't need to perform. It probably is probably the mentally healthiest thing that I could do, but my capacity for self-punishment is such that I don't need to do it, because I can suffer indefinitely. I've tested myself over the last year and a half. I've been, I've been mentally ill, depressed, shut in a room, and now the rest of the world's joined me. Hi, rest of the world, and I'm at the point now where I'm starting to re-engage. Not quite sure how that's going to go. We'll get back to that later. But so yeah, I'm in Japan, and then I go to Thailand to investigate boredom, and then I go to Europe for the first time ever, and I go straight to Paris, and I work in Paris for about 3 weeks. I get arrested. I get put back on the street. Then I go to Barcelona. Then I go to Ibiza, and then do you know Hugo, the Argentinian pantomime?
I know Hugo, a Spanish pantomime, but not the Argentinian one. No.
Well, I think originally he might have been Argentinian. He's got long hair. He's got a long
Oh no,
face.
definitely not then. No, the guy I know is about 25 and he's got a bald head.
No, he's my age. Who knows whether he's still even around? But he'd been in Ibiza for 20 years, and I'd met him in Japan. And so he introduced me to all the owners of all the clubs, and they all employed me. And then I still had this 3.5-minute dance piece, and I'd do, the biggest nightclub in Europe was called Coup at the time. It's probably changed its name. They had an indoor swimming pool and
Wow.
with the dance floor on top. The sirens would go off and the lights would go off, and then the floor of the dance floor would go to reveal like a Bond villain swimming pool, and then this fountain would come out of it. And, they shut the music down. The DJ was really angry, but they shut the music down and played my music, and I did my dance piece, and so I did really well there. I got paid really well there, and plus I was earning good money. And then I went from there back up to Paris. Then I did my first London experience.
So just before we go on to London, when you say you went to Paris, you said you got arrested. Was the environment hostile to street performers at that time?
No. I was arrested. I think it was on my way back. I got arrested because it was October, and they do like immigration sweeps to get rid of the Algerians so that they don't lean on the social welfare system. And I just got caught in that, and I didn't have my passport on me. And I was performing on the Avenue of the Innocents as well. And so I just totted over to the signpost and pointed at it. And all my audience just fucking cracked up, but then they arrested me. I've written a lot of these things, stories I've written as well. Like I
believe you have a number of books out now.
I have a number, and that number is 2. The first one is an alphabetical book because I was listing the towns and cities that I'd worked in one lonely day when I needed to pat myself on the back. And I hit the keys by mistake while reaching across my computer. And I must have accidentally hit the shortcut that made the list alphabetical. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then I realized I was missing 7 letters of the alphabet. And suddenly my life had a purpose again. And I spent like 10 years getting those 7 letters. And I finished with X in China. And I'd already done a lot of stories because I'd put them up on PNet. And then I thought, I'm going to publish a book with 26 stories, one from each place, like Auckland, Barcelona, whatever.
Can I just ask you a quick question from the comments? Compiler Lindsay asks, did you ever work Bristol in the 80s and 90s?
I don't think I've ever worked Bristol. But I may have. I mean, my memory's not that good. Well, I mean, I did things like I went up to Northumberland and did some tiny little places. I loved the safari aspect of it, you know, like that's why I did Glasgow, because I'm like, Glasgow's got this reputation of being hard, you know, and it's a well-won reputation, I might add, after having experienced Glasgow. But
they deserved it.
But they like authenticity. That's all they want. They don't want. If you're conceited in any way, they'll just take you apart. But same with Dublin to a degree, but Dublin's more playful. Glasgow is tough, you know. And so I went to Glasgow because I secretly wanted to die, and I did really well in Glasgow. Like I just, you know, the junkies, you know, threatened to slash my face.
Are you saying you're in search of a murderer?
I'm in search of a murderer?
Murderer. It seems like you said you wanted to die, so you went to Glasgow in search of a murderer.
Yeah. I met one while I was there. He just got out. He'd been in for like a decade, and he was one of the first people I met. And because he was sitting on the same park bench that I was getting ready, and his big problem was that he'd that weekend gone fishing, and he'd caught a big freshwater crayfish, and he'd brought it back for his girlfriend and put it in the bath, but now she'd got all soft-hearted and didn't want to kill it and eat it, and had blamed him for the cruelty of bringing it back from the river and putting it in its mouth. And I'm just like, I love Glasgow. Like, this guy just killed somebody 10 years ago, and now he's talking to me about his soft-hearted girlfriend and stuff, and it's fucking hilarious because he was hard. And so let's jump back to where I was. So I did. Yeah, so
then I went. Come to Europe. You're in Paris the second time.
Yeah. And then I got arrested, but I got let out the same day, and I just went. You know, I had a daytime pitch and a nighttime pitch.
Was immigration an issue for performers in that day when you were working? Did they ever say, do you have a right to work here kind of thing? Or
I've always been very lucky in that way because my father was born in England. So I'm one of you.
Yeah, you got UK citizenship.
Yeah, I've got like a British passport and a New Zealand passport. And then later on, I got married in America. So I had a green card and I had American passport. So I had a green card and a British passport and a New Zealand passport. So my green card has since lapsed, which I'm a little bit sorry about, but it's all right.
The place will be on fire by the end of the year anyway.
Yeah, they're all welcome here. Like all you people will work something out. You know, like New Zealand's going to be okay. You know, the world is going to basically implode this decade. Like first we've got the virus, and then that's just going to be a perennial thing, and then the rest of the climate change with crop failures and systematic dismantling of our civilization. It's all going to happen this decade if I'm lucky, because then I get to watch. But you're all welcome over here. Like,
see you there, everybody. We're all going to go to New Zealand.
Yeah. We'll get a nice place in the South Island. Just all invest in a ocean going blue water catamaran or a large yacht of some description, and then we'll just ferry you over back and forth. From wherever you are, we'll send a boat, we'll pick you up, and then we'll bring you here.
So we got one more question from MJ. So one more. Sorry to interrupt. I do apologise. One more question from AJ. She's saying, how easy was it to get spots around the Pompidou Centre?
I didn't. I did a few there, and it wasn't difficult. I chose. I worked the Pompidou outside there, but I was also, because I was on stilts, I had this bias that I really didn't want my audience above me, because it sort of
defeats the purpose.
And I have this weird thing where I'm doing a hybrid type of circle show. Like I'm part installation, I'm part follow mime, and so I tend to just want to impose myself in a public place that has certain elements, that has a corner or a niche, and it has audience, it has pedestrian flow, and it has an audience catchment area. So, and that means I don't have to work where everyone else is working. But it also means if you know, I know I get big crowds. I'm not insecure in that way. Just more people to dislike. But
yeah. Oh, we could talk about that later. I think that's quite an interesting thing.
But so what I
suppose
I did a couple, and I didn't find it clicky. I knew I had to find my own space though, because it wasn't for me. So then I went to the right or left, depending which way you face.
Just going to nick to the loo, Martin. Please carry on. Okay, I'll be back in 2 seconds.
I went to where there's a fountain there, and there's it's directly to the side of where most people work, and I worked there for a bit. But then I ended up going to across the road from the Pompidou to where the Algerian junkies hang out, next to the empty fountain, and there's arches with apartments above them, and there's a subway entrance just past the arches, and I'd worked the arches, which gave me a piazza of my own on the flat to work. The arches had a lot of traffic of people, and I worked that. That ended up being my pitch. It was good to find places that no one else was working, because you could just work them yourself. Like you didn't.
So what do you find about the modern thing of licensing? Sorry to interrupt. What do you find about the modern licensing of city centres? So what they have is they have pitches, and the street performance happens in this place, and the rest of the city almost becomes off limits. It becomes hemmed in.
Well, you can't. First off, you can't take it personally, otherwise you'll lose your mind. But it's the last 20 years, street theatre has become a great deal more regulated, and you know, the blame for that can be shared between anal bureaucrats. There's also inner cities have become monetized by the councils themselves. You're competing with signage now that you didn't used to. Like, people pay the council to put their advertising up on things, and that has a certain worth, and so they don't want performers in front of those things because those things are assets. And there was also, I think as performers we have to take collectively some responsibility, because there's always people that are gonna do things that aren't acceptable, and therefore they have to be, regulation is required. But the thing is, there's never a backward step. As soon as you regulate something, that becomes a status quo, and then someone pushes that button and it becomes more regulated, and it never goes backwards. So it's, I just see it, I see that there's a lot more festivals now than there used to be, and street theatre itself has been commodified a great deal more than it has, because what street theatres do, what festivals do, is they subtly commodify performances, because you arrive, the audience is already there, you do your show. It becomes an outdoor cabaret type modular thing, whereas street theatre used to be a little bit more intrinsically subversive. You would put yourself somewhere in public, and you know, you would make it your place. I used to love having a cup of coffee and a cigarette, sitting in front of my pitch, just going, these people have no idea that my money is in their pockets. You know, and then you'd go, and then you would colonize the space and make it yours. And it was, you know, we were very lucky to be given that freedom to be able to do that. That freedom isn't as available now as it used to be. The competition for space now is just a lot. It's a lot more competitive, both with street performers and just with everything in general. And then when you marry that to the decrease in overall attention spans that people have, and then when you put the fact that everyone now has a computer that they're looking at very regularly as they perambulate around the city, they're not wide-eyed looking for impulses. They've got all their impulses at hand, literally. And then when you marry that to just the overall decrease of the public commons over the last 30 years, then regulation is just part of that mosaic of kind of oppressive reality that has encroached on what used to be an imperfect but more kind of free form of public life, public expression. I mean, for my theory is that street theatre sort of everything began from street theatre. Like ballet began from street theatre. All the arts began from street theatre, and all the street theatre happened in the courtyard outside the church. That's where the merchants would gather, because that was the place everyone went, and then that's where people would try their little side hustles, and street theatre was just one of many side hustles. And now that, and then they used to build. So in Europe, that kind of architecture and that sort of civic planning, they still do that. They make big open spaces where people can be pedestrianised. But then you go to America, and because it's such a young country, they didn't do that. They went suburban, and you go to LA. There's just footpaths. There's no.
Well, people don't walk a lot of time, do they? They drive to places.
Yeah, there's
parks everywhere.
There's no open space. There's no open public space. Very little. Like, you got Washington Square. I was really disappointed to find that what's the one in Boston?
Boston Mall, is it?
No. It sounds really cool too. The place in Boston where everyone works. Not
comments.
Yeah, it's not outside the not outside the shop the shopping place, but Harvard Square. That's what it was. Harvard Square, and you're like, oh, Harvard Square. Harvard's a big university. It must be a grand. And you go there, and it's a fucking traffic island next to a footpath, and it's like, oh, really? But having said that, it's a lovely place. It's got a lovely community. Harvard Square. Thank you, Lee. And Faneuil Hall is the shopping space. Hey, guys. So yeah, I mean, America's not built for street theatre, but street theatre is really adaptable. So, like, New York, people did it anyway. People did it at the beach at LA. People did it for the sunsets in Myrtle Beach. People, like, I think Louisiana, New Orleans, it's a little different because it's kind of still got that French thing going architecturally. So they do have, squares, and they do have
piazzas and things like that.
Yeah. So it works there, but it's America is, and I mean, Lee's here. Boulder, Colorado has like a boulevard type place where street theatre was always welcome. There's a little known place called Asheville in North Carolina that they have a wonderful attitude towards street theatre. Like, the police come up and they go, "Hello, what's your name? Are you okay? Like how are you going?" And they've got this really wonderful attitude where they think street theatre is integral to the community.
Well, it always amazed me when I heard in New York that they arrest street performers. You think, well, in America, you have this freedom of speech and you have all these freedom of expression, real core ideals that seem to go in tandem with street performance. But yet it seems a lot of places in America, it's quite undermined by the authorities.
Yeah, I think that's best summed up by the someone, and in the southern states of America, they just look at you and go, "Oh, bless your heart." Yeah, like, this is a stunning piece of news, and you're going to need to brace yourself. But America isn't all it says it is, in terms of what freedom you have. But then, America, it tests people, so you end up having to be either incredibly talented or psychotic, or a mixture of both.
And why would you say that?
Oh, because there's a lot of psychotic American street performers.
And so you have
and
to be aggressive, you have to be harsh, or you have to
yeah,
be okay, yeah. So it's like yeah,
because there's it's got a very much an every man for themselves thing, whereas I think some informal guilds have formed where people support each other, but there's I've found it more than anywhere else. There are there are people who it might take you a couple of years to grudgingly respect someone who's always yelling over the top of your crowd, look at me, I'm better than he is, you know. And you were talking about the pan flutists with Nick, you know.
yeah. I describe them as magic carpets. I believe. I think it's Pop who gave me that name, or maybe Paddy.
Yeah, I call them the Manilow of the Andes. But how did we get there? England.
So we're talking about being in Paris, being arrested in Paris. So then we talked about
Yeah,
authoritarianism, working together on pitches. We drew into America, the Commons. But should we go back to the chronology of your thing and back to Paris? So you're arrested in Paris. You've just come back from Ibiza.
yeah, and then I was arrested.
You went to London.
Yeah. Then I went to London, and then I was living I started working Covent Garden, but I'd fly pitch on Covent Garden. I passed the audition, whatever. But again, I didn't really want to do the big thing because I had a thing happen to me in Paris that Lurk kind of got real in London because I was performing in Paris and someone dumped a huge 10-gallon bucket of water on me, or tried to, from the sixth story of an apartment building that I was performing outside, and it drenched my sound system and killed it. So I went to London and I started doing stuff without the music entirely, and so that's when my character was let off the leash, so to speak.
Isn't it interesting? Taking something away is such an encouragement to growth for shows. It seems.
Yeah, and
take the crutches.
I've also found, although I've done a lot of things, and had a pretty intense time of it all in all, it's partly because I've said no more than I've said yes. That's another thing that I've realized. Like, I say no a lot. I say I am not prepared to in my head all the time. I'm not prepared to, and then whatever it is. And then so I don't do that thing. And it shuts distractive options out and leaves a clearer path in front of me. So there's that as well. I mean, the more things you say no to, the easier it is sometimes to move forward.
Clearness of vision rather than being drowned in options. I believe they call it the paralysis of choice.
Yeah, that'll be it. And also when people ask me to do things and I said no, I don't.
Fair enough.
It actually, like in marketing terms, if you say no 3 times, the fourth person offers you more money. And that's just the way it works, you know.
So as you're developing, so you've got the amp's been trashed, and so you're starting to talk. So how does this Lurk show develop then? What's the process of the formation of it and the evolution of it?
Well, I'd always been dour. I'd always been like an unhappy clown, but just I was more confused than angry. And then I met a clown in Paris who was malevolently angry, and I used to watch him every day, and it was
it
just
tongue in cheek? Was it tongue in cheek? Was he angry, but in a pantomime angry? I'm angry, but wink. I'm not really angry, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it always comes down to that.
Yeah.
Well, it's got to be a shared
so.
joke, otherwise it's just a psychotic angry person. But they've got to be able to identify with the anger. But so I met him, but he was malevolently angry, in that he just took it a step further. And I was like, I didn't know you could do that. I was just looking, like I do clown classes very, very rarely. And I know that part of my role is that I just have to give people permission. That's what they're doing it for. They don't want skills. They just want permission. They can get their own skills. They just want me to say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because it's easier coming from someone else than it is.
Sounds like the opposite of golly, eh?
Yeah. And so I saw this guy, and I really liked him. I watched him every day, and I'd always have my stilts with me. And then he worked out who I was. I was the stilt guy who worked a couple of blocks up. And then he came and saw me, because he only worked at night, and I'd work in the daytime and the night time. The daytime would pay my rent, the night time would be my drinking money, because that's all my life consisted of. And I just found him, I was just besotted with him as a clown. I'm just like, oh man, this is so, I'm so stealing this. And I didn't really steal, like he had a paintbrush and I have a fly swat, but they're the same thing.
Although his Picasso thing.
He'd just pull his paintbrush out of his pocket and just look at the audience, and as if to say, I'm an artist. And then he just put it back in his thing. And occasionally he'd use it as a potential dagger. And I've got a fly swat. I use the fly swat's a guitar, the fly swat's a violin, the fly swat's a fly swat.
But you got the inspiration for this prop from that, yeah?
Yeah, and the inspiration to be really, really malevolently unhappy from him. So I started doing that, and I'd work. I did a fly pitch across from the pub that's on that road on the way to the subway from Govan. But then I had I would have this running battle with Julia, who was a policewoman who hated me, and who I thought was a malevolent evil in the world. And she would come up to me and say truly evil things like, you're just the same as those people that sell jewellery. And I'd go, because that's a terrible thing to say.
She knew how to hurt you.
Yeah. And so then I started branching out, and I worked in, I'd do some work. I ended up having my own pitch in Carnaby Street, where Muju is now, if Muju's still there.
I don't go there very often myself.
And brilliant. It was brilliant. And I'd go too far sometimes. Like this woman I gave this woman heart palpitations. She just stood there going, and then she walked away, and then she came back like an hour later, and she's an old lady. I can see her coming for ages, and I'm like, oh no, and she's like, and she walked right up into my show, and she said, I have a heart condition, And if I were to have had a cardiac arrest, that would have been very, very serious. And then, you know, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I wish I could talk. I wish I could talk, because I wanted to say, so sex is out of the question then. But I didn't talk. I held my tongue. And then she went, I've told the police about you. And then she walked away. And so I you know, I learned, don't go for the really old people. Don't, because you might actually kill them. And so that was when I first started. And
It's a good
and
guide. Don't kill people.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, back in Australia, every second Tuesday used to be pension day, and I loved that, because they'd all come in to get their money, and it's like you just don't move towards them, because that sets off their fight or flight. You can be there behind the corner, glaring at them, pulling faces at them, and if they see you, they'll get a little start. But if you're actually moving towards them when they first see you, that's palpitation material, so don't do that.
So you learn to how to gently suggest stuff as opposed to imposing.
Yeah, I just learned. I just I just learned. You know, like I learned how to be. Firstly, I was amazed that I could just be so mean to people, and and everyone loved me. That was really great, because it was the most authentic I could be. Like, I basically took my twisted mental disorder and made a living out of it by putting whiteface on. And I could use my hypervigilance, because I could read people really quickly. And I'd select the one that I wanted to do. And I do I wasn't directly mimicking them. I'd do this Buto thing where I'd look at them and I just look at their conceited soul, and then I would just be that as they walked past. And the audience would get something, because that's the other thing you learn, is that the audiences with pantomime, they're making it up themselves. The theatre's happening in their own heads. They're reading dialogue into things. You're suggesting dialogue, they're reading it at their own reading level. So you've got multiple dialogues happening in the audience at any one point. And after a while, you learn how to sharpen those, so that, and also after about 20 minutes, once everyone's abdicated their personal consciousness and become part of the group consciousness, then I might be, this is speculation on my part, but it's all speculation. You know, they all start hearing the same voice in their head at the same time, if you've got them really going.
Convergent narrative.
Yeah. Just that. So I was doing that, and then there's an agent in London, Richard Bucknell Management. He's in the West End, and he put his card in my hat, and I'm like, ooh, look, there's a card in my hat. And he would represent, he'd typically represent whoever had won the Perrier Award, back when that was a thing. And so, you know, I was flattered that he thought I had potential. And I went and had a talk with him, and then nothing really happened. But I would use him passively. And then, so I did London for a bit, but London's got this quality where it can be really hard to leave London.
I've been there 15 years.
Yeah, it's like London, all cities are like this, I found. Once you've been in them for a set period of time, it's really hard to think outside where you are, and to know that outside like, for example, when you're in winter in London, it's really hard to imagine what it would be like in Perth. You know, that life goes on, the sun comes up, it's hot, it's really hot, la 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 la, because you're in London. And so he did get me a gig. He got me a gig with BBC Four for some children's program set in a burger place. And I was a pantomime outside the burger place for one episode. And with the money I got from that, I left London and went to Dublin.
So what year are we at now then, roughly?
That whatever year Dublin was the European cultural capital.
I don't know, but we can research that and find it, and
Yeah,
we can
you
capture
can
it
find
later.
that out. It was probably 91, 92, 93, 94, I don't know. But I thought, I'm cultural, I'll go there then. And so I went there, and that was another one of my stories, is my Dublin story. And I had a whole street theatre crew, like a street gang. I had a street gang who were representing me, which was really wise on my part.
What do you mean by a gang? Like the local lads sort of thing? The local hangabouts? Yeah, okay, I understand.
Yeah, obviously what I did was I got there, I left my stilts in wherever I was staying, and then I just sat on, can't remember the street in Dublin, but it's the main pedestrian street, and Grafton, and I just watched, because there was a flower seller, and I'm like, well, when he goes at 6 or 7, I'll take that corner. And I just watched. I just observed, and I noted 6 or 7 different street crews cruising around, and sometimes they'd meet and talk to each other, and then I could easily work out who was the leader in each one, and la 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 la. And there was one that I saw, and their leader was the smallest person. He was like a little Rottweiler dude who was like about 14, 15. And I thought, there, I'll deal with those guys. I like them. And so then I went away, got my shit, came back, sat there, waited until they came past, and then I walked up to them and I introduced myself, and I said, hey, my name's Martin, I'm from New Zealand. I do street shows, and I need some help. I want to pay I want to pay 16% of what I make to 1 or 2 people who just go and get my hat for me after my show. No, not bottlers, just go and get it, because I'm on stilts and I can't reach it. Go and get it.
Okay.
And go down to the shops and get me Fanta and packets of cigarettes when I need them, and just general runners, you know.
And also they're keeping an eye for you at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't say that, but that's what I wanted. And so, and I said, look, and just for context, like, I make 100, 150 pounds every night, you know, so that's what you're looking at. And they're like, oh, we'll do it we'll give it a shot. And then they would just, I employed them, and they looked out for me, and I didn't get any hassle from any of the other crews. The other crews would come in and they'd introduce me like I belonged to them. Like, this is our pet's clown, you know? And yeah. And then afterwards, the little Rottweiler guy would wait outside the pub that I would go and have my pints in after my gig. And then he would walk me from that pub to the taxi so that nobody robbed me on his turn, and then he'd let me go. It was fucking brilliant.
Yeah, and I suppose for him, he's got pride, hasn't he? He's like, yeah, I take good care of my people.
Yeah. And I met so many really interesting people in a way that was not confrontational. The police came up at one point, and they're all just, yep, you know, because they're kind of got a relationship, symbiotic relationship anyway. And he goes, you know, what's up? And I go, I'm just, this is what I'm doing. Like this, I'm paying them 16% of what I make just to go and get my hat for me. It's symbiotic. This guy's got a sleeping bag out of it already. Like, da 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 da. And he just looked at me and he went, all power to you then. I had the street people on my side. I had the police on my side. There's nothing makes your heart feel better than having the police on your side when they're the only people that can really shut you down.
Yeah.
And I had the same.
And if things go really, really bad, it's a good thing to have as well.
Yeah. And because the police said to me, just so you know, there's always one or two of us in the crowd looking for pickpockets as well. And because I had the same thing in Glasgow, like this cop came past on a horse, and I pretended I was fucking terrified, and he threw. They have raincoats that go over the flanks of the horse, and he brushed that aside and patted the back of the horse like hop on, and I didn't obviously, but just to know that he was prepared to play with me was just in this really harsh place, because Glasgow's a really hard place. I'm just like, relief, you know, because Julia back in London, she was just, as soon as you saw her, it was just like fucking, it's over. She could stand in my crowd. She could stand in my crowd and glare at me, and then just go like that once with her fucking head, and I go, like I'd finish and leave. She had me completely cowed. So yeah,
but she's probably quite bored. You know, she probably didn't have much to do. Whereas your Glaswegian police officers and your Dublin police officers, they're probably quite busy.
Though she was just conceived through a cancerous penis. She was just spiteful. Every molecule about her was fucking evil. And so then I was doing Dublin, working there, and then this I had the cops on my side, and I had the street people on my side, and I was making really good money, and I had a really nice place to live, and I was just buying. I'd go and have my beers, and then I was just reading. I've always read a lot, and I'd just read a lot of Irish authors. And then this perpetually tanned dude walks up to me after a show and says, I'd like to ask you about your availability. And I said, are you propositioning me? And he went, in a manner of speaking, yes, I am. And they wrote me into a Tom Cruise movie. It's just another super weird thing that happened to me. So the Tom Cruise movie was being shot in Dublin, and I was able to reach into my pocket and pull out this card and go talk to my agent. And he was a real deal dude in London, and so he negotiated.
Richard Barton, was it?
Richard Bucknell Management, RBM. And so I got thousands of pounds. I was a principal actor, which meant I spoke more than 16 words, and which they cut out of the movie. But I'm still in the movie, just my stilts walk past Tom Cruise. And there's another scene where Tom Cruise looks out and watches me because I'm a lamplighter, and says, I love this country or something. And so, yeah, then I had also this Tom Cruise gig while I was in Dublin. So that was fantastic. So that was one of my loveliest seasons ever. Then I left, and then for maybe the next 5 or 6 years, I just do Europe summer. Then I base myself in Perth, then do a little bit over in New Zealand, come back to Perth, then Europe, Perth, a little bit New Zealand, Perth, and I'd occasionally go up to Japan for gigs. And then,
so did you kind of get a rhythm to your year?
yeah, they just go summer, 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 summer. And I tend to base myself not in London, but in Copenhagen. And then, so from Copenhagen, I do a bit in Germany, and I went up to Iceland, and but I just do the round tower in Copenhagen, which I didn't quite have to myself, but it wasn't the main pitch. And because I was silent, they liked me there because there's a ballet school in the building next to it. And they came out and told me that they particularly liked me because all they heard was intermittent laughter, and I wasn't yelling, and I wasn't playing a piano, and which were the other alternatives. And so I did that for 6 years, and then so that took me up to around 99, and then I wasn't doing that many festivals. Other people had started doing festivals, and I wasn't doing festivals. I thought I'll do festivals for 2 years before I retire, and I'll just make heaps of money at festivals. And then I did get offered the Halifax Festival, and I did the Halifax Festival, and it didn't really work well for me. I just got given a really bad pitch outside a shop that didn't want me there. And I'm like, why did you fly me all the way from fucking Europe and put me outside a person that complains to you every day and sends the security to stop me working every day?
And I suppose this is the difficulty with your work as well, as it seems your work works at its best. It flourishes being site-specific. You find an area which works with that. And that's one of the problems, I think, with street festivals is that, from what I can see, at least from the limited experience I have of them, that it takes more of the festival and less of the street.
Yeah,
you don't have these site-specific things.
There are, like Edmonton Festival told me that I could go anywhere in the city and work. I'd be fine. But then, so I did Halifax all by myself. Then I met Shelley at Halifax, and she runs Edmonton. And what I didn't know is that she also ran about 6 or 7 other festivals. And what I also didn't know is that there used to be a meeting of all the producers, like January, February, and they'd all get together and do their casting collectively. And I had, when I was in Perth, I had researched that, because I'm into arts administration. I like the back end of street theatre festivals, and I like the back end of administration. And
so what do you mean by that? Is that booking acts, or is that organising? Is that talking to councils? What is that?
It's getting procedures down to self-promote. And then you can also apply that to festivals if you're producing festivals, and just the mechanisms that go behind it. I'm always interested because I know these people do a lot of work, like Jodie Wright and Shelley. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the background, and I'm always just curious because I'm a subtextualist. I want to know what's going on in the background. And so I had contacted the university because the Perth University, unlike New Zealand universities, New Zealand universities do a event production Bachelor of Commerce type thing. But Australia does arts administration. Bachelor of something, commerce or arts, or I'm not quite sure. So I contacted them and said, can I get one of your students to help me with kind of promotion as an exercise or whatever? And so I got this, I'm embarrassed I can't remember her name. She was a lovely woman who organized my letterhead, helped me organize my letterhead. I also had this amazing guy who was an adult student in his 30s who was going to film school, and he did my my promo video, which I still think stands out among the dross as a particularly well representative piece of promo. And so I'd sent that, and Shelley at this meeting, who'd seen me the year before, when I was under duress at this place, got me. They ended up calling it the Lurk Tour.
So just to replace where we are, we're at which festival are we at here? We're at Wellington Festival, is it? Which festival? Not at Edmonton yet. It's festival for Edmonton, right? The festival where you left outside a shop.
I was in. Yeah, that was Halifax, that's in Canada.
And is that when you met Shelley?
Yeah, she turned up to that festival just to look at because she was taking over from Dick Finkel, who used to run Edmonton, who started Edmonton. She had been his lieutenant forever, but then his health was fading, and she probably knew that she was going to take it over. But anyway, so I ended up doing the Lurk Tour, which was like 13 different festivals in one season in Canada. Just Windsor, Waterloo, just all these festivals. I was completely booked for the whole year and the whole season. And so I did all these festivals and kind of found out that festivals weren't this holy grail that I thought they were. That they were.
Why do you think that? Yeah, sorry, you must say that anyway. Carry on.
Well, they're a different animal. They're just a different animal. And
do you want to go into that a little bit more? Why they're a different animal? What you mean by that?
Well, because they subtly encourage outdoor cabaret as opposed to street theatre. But street theatre can't exist to the same degree inside a festival because festivals have their own legitimate expectations. They trying to get, because their sponsors demand that there's certain acts happen at certain times in certain places, and that's the way it should be. That's different from a street environment where you're kind of a little more subversive, and also over a long period of time, there's now a whole generation of performers who just do festivals.
Never seen the street.
Yeah, why would they need to? They just do festivals, and they have these polished 40-minute street-based, circus skills-based, start at this end, finish at this end. Maybe 3 or 4 things might happen in their show if they're very lucky that allow them to improvise a little bit. Whereas, and it's not absolute. I mean, there were people that didn't do festivals on kind of principle, like Living Space was one of those. Swamp of Trivia. He's here.
He was talking about the perplexity. They were talking about the paralysis of choice, and so his coinage was the swamp of trivia.
I can't put anything on here, which is
I think you can type. If you go down to type, I think you can. If you want to. There should be a bottom corner just there.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be, although it says host chat. Type
Yeah,
something.
so that's host chat. Yes, there you go. The other option as well, if you want to post into the chat, is you can go into the live feed on Facebook that people are watching from us, and you can type in there, and so people will see it from there as well.
Well, I'll just test this.
Yeah, by all means. So, just on the note of festivals, I think half of my gripe with it is that I don't get booked for them. That's half of my gripe. But my other half of gripe is that I love street shows. I love shows where you can see people looking for the chaos and looking to play. And if you want to check on what you're doing now, I'm kind of filling in while you're doing that as well. So feel free to check and play. You've done it. Okay.
I wrote a thing about living space a long time ago, and no, maybe it didn't happen.
Fair enough. So just to keep the conversation rolling while you're playing, one of the things that frustrates me a bit is I love to watch street where they're looking for the chaos and they're looking to see what can be made out of that moment. And when I go to festivals or I see a lot of the people booked for the festivals that have these kind of, as you kind of describe it, they're kind of cabaret shows finessed into a street format, a public format. Right. It disappoints me a little bit because where is the platform for the crazy clowns and the people who cut their teeth by being, fallout people on the street if you don't have the festivals?
Well, that's where Living Space has done really well because he brings the insanity with him. And he subverts reality, so it doesn't matter what that there is that crazy thing. It can happen. I've also seen simulations of that crazy thing at street shows where it's just like a lot of it would appear to the uneducated, and who would want to spend years educating themselves about what is a street cliche and what isn't, but I've seen crazy acts that are just a soup of pantomime cliches, one after the other, done with a certain amount of pace, and I'm watching because I'm like, yeah, you're allowed that, but I'm waiting for the soul of it. I'm waiting to see the soul of it, and there is none. And then it's just like,
what's you in this?
Wacky, yeah. and then it finishes.
Is that the whole thing about a curator? And this is something I've drawn on a lot in the interviews. Is the idea of being a curator of old material or being an artist who has a voice that they try and express. Do you kind of get what I'm getting at with that?
No, my mind was elsewhere. Say it again.
Yeah, no worries. So by creator, I mean curator. I mean, you're saying when you watch, say, for example, A Crazy Clown, you can see there's lots of different bits of classic hack for a clown, and they compose it together like a DJ would compose a DJ set.
Right.
And then you have someone who has a message that they're trying to convey, and they're figuring out a way to convey that message. Yeah. And so one is like craft and curator, and the other one's the artist. Yeah. I'm interested in the interplay.
Yeah, but then, yeah, it's very subjective. You either feel it or you don't, and I'm really hard to please as well. I use cliches. There's the thing where you drop the hanky and then they pick it up and give it to you, and then you wait until their back's turned and you throw it back down on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, from watching shows for 15 years now, I think we all do. We all do to an extent, but then there is definitely some people where you can see you've got something personal to say that is external to this stuff, and then there's other people who can say you are just wanting to make a piece of craft. You're not trying to say something, you're trying to make something that works. You're into the mechanics of it, as opposed to the expression.
Again, it all comes down to being. It's all very subjective, because I'm sure that everyone loves the smell of their own farts. You know, it's just like some of these people that have strewn together cliches for a decade are convinced that they're artists. And having said that, I'm sure that there are people that could see my show and think the same thing, but I'd love to meet them. You know,
Anywhere, anytime.
No, because I'm really critical. I'm you don't get to walk around with this wheelbarrow full of self-hatred and not be fucking critical.
Are you self-critical? You're self-critical. You tear yourself to bits.
Yeah. I mean,
do you think that's integral to the creative process? Walking off the pitch after a show and going, for fuck's sake, and then dwelling on that for 24 hours, is that important?
Oh no, I don't do that. That's why I drank. So I didn't have to do that. Typically I'd finish work, go and have several drinks, buy some to take home, go home, read while drinking until I couldn't focus on the words, go to sleep, rinse and repeat. That was basically my life. Although socially, having said that I didn't trust anything and that I only kind of trusted laughter, I felt I felt street performers were a brethren of sorts, because I could take for granted that they were people that, like me, had failed hundreds of times, and whatever arrogance they projected was informed by the fact that they'd failed hundreds of times, as I have failed hundreds of times. Whereas people in other professions, I didn't get that from them. I'm like, they actually believed in themselves right from the get-go. Like, they've always thought of themselves as a doctor or an accountant or whatever they are. We had to form ourselves through a crucible of failure and embarrassment, and to be the non-entities that we are. And so I tended to trust my mates that have been through this process. And so
were the friends... Sorry, carry on.
Does it?
So were your friends group, the busking community, were they part of the writing process?
Some of them, yeah. Like I did exercises with Nicholas. We wrote... I wrote a thing about the Royal Easter Show, and I kept, because it's a 10-day gig, and so I kept a diary of it, and which is that's my A story in my first book. I only have my first book here, and in these days of everyone rushing.
Would you like to, while showing it, would you like to plug it?
No,
you can buy it from.
That was me just plugging it.
Yeah, fair. Well, where can they get it from if they want to get it? If anyone would like to read your book now after the interesting stories that tell for it.
Lulu.com. I can't put stuff on here. I've got the host chat, but apparently
the host chat is me and you. So if you want to post to the forum, in fact, if you want to, I can copy and paste, but probably better is if you open another window up in Facebook, you find the video in Facebook, and then you comment on that video on Facebook. It's pain in the arse.
Yeah. I'm not doing that, but I mean,
I'll copy and paste your comments in now. Carry on, mate.
I did a lot of research for this interview, and I had other people's websites, and I had the Buskers Hall of Fame thing. So
we can put them all in after the video.
So yeah, I did a big tour of the festivals in Canada, and I did a lot of writing for that because that was when the original PNet was up and running, and so I would do what I thought were comical reviews of the festivals, like the Waterloo Festival, for example. The thing that strikes me about that was that there was this fridge that was magic and that you could not empty the fridge. The fridge was full of beer, and like wave after wave of street performer every night would hit this fucking fridge, and you could not empty the fridge because Lynn, who was one of the administrators, would just keep filling the fridge, and we would just keep hitting the fridge. And there was two fridges. There was that fridge, which was the nighttime fridge, that just said, "I will steal your soul, come, come." And, you know, and I would write that, you know, some people actually just crawled into the fridge and closed the door behind them. But then the other fridge was the morning fridge, and it was just full of muesli bars and juices, and that welcomed you every morning going, "Good morning," you know. And then the evil fridge was in the corner. So I started, that's when I started writing a lot, because I would just do reviews, and I would do reviews of the festivals, and then I would do little descriptions of the various performers, which was also fun for me. And
was it helpful for the youngians who are thinking about how they develop stuff? Was it a helpful process, writing and doing little reviews and having this?
It was, because I'll have to find it. It's in a hard drive somewhere, bound to be. But I did a whole thing about how to market yourself, like a really involved arts administration thing of, okay, first find a reason to live, then get out of bed, and then basically how to get a tour together. But it was back in the day when you had to post videos. So I had already tried to be generous in that way. And I can remember Robert saying, you're weird, Martin, because you give all this amazing advice to people and you don't do any of it yourself. Which is kind of true, because I like winging it. I liked winging it. So we're just about finished the thing. So I did before I did the Canadian festival, I was in New Zealand, and I had the money to fly because Canada had sent me that. And I'd met Carl Salater, Taxi Tricks, who's an American performer. And he had extended me a visit to go and hang out in Connecticut. He lives in a converted church by a river. And so instead of staying here for the autumn, I thought I'll go for spring in New Zealand, in America. And so I went to America for the first time and hung out for about a month and a half before the season in Connecticut. And that was my beginning thing in America. And then I did Canada, ended up hanging out with the Sillies and the Silly People. And then...
Is the Silly People a group, or is it just generally people who are silly?
It's Phil, second name, Phil LeConte, and fill in the blanks, someone else fill in the blanks. His partner, I can't remember his partner's name. Lovely guys, both of them, really lovely. And then didn't work. So
it's okay, mate. Just carry on the best you can.
I did Canada, went back to America, and then I met. Yeah, I don't have to be perfect with the chronology. I met a woman. Ended up living with her. Ended up marrying her, and also, then the second year I went back to Canada, I had done some things with my website where I created, because I knew that the lurk thing, I could do roving at festivals, which was, I got paid a set fee, which if I was a money act, I'd be making a lot more. But I I started saying, well, festivals aren't that good for lurk, but what festivals do offer is they're really amazing for comic installation type stuff, because they're the first time I did Edmonton, I met John Ulliott, who was dressed up as a dung beetle, and he was dressed up as a beetle, and he had this big ball that he'd roll around like a dung beetle does, and he'd have post-it notes, pads, and pens stuck to his costume, and he'd introduce himself to people and go, "Hello, I'm a dung beetle, and we collect shit." And then he'd give them the pad and a pen and say, "So if you could just write down the shit in your life, I could add them to my ball." And he did that every day. This ball got bigger and bigger with the cumulative, figurative shit of his audience. And I'm like, that's conceptually just brilliant. And I thought, well, festivals might kind of be a bit cheese monstery in terms of the circle shows, but in terms of the potential they offer for sort of modular conceptual comic stuff, they're brilliant. And so I wrote all these potentials on my website, these kind of modular things, and one of them was two guys in business suits who competitively, they arrived, they had a little table, they set the tables up, and they had a briefcase, and in the briefcase was a plate, a jar, a fly swat, and a dead fish. And they put the dead fish on the plate, and then they used the fly swats to competitively catch flies. And then when they killed the fly, they'd pick it up and put it in the jar and look at the other person like, ha, 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 I'm winning. And that was the show. And so then the next year, some very brave festival actually commissioned me to produce that. And I had my friends are silly people with the actors, and I was the director, and we produced this thing where they competitively caught flies at a street show, and that was where the curious ape syndrome came in, because subtextually I was experimenting with how long could something not make sense while still arresting an audience, especially at a festival when they're already there, because nothing makes sense until you start catching the flies with that. That's the first time you go, oh, that's what they're doing. And we would go like 18 minutes before anyone caught a fucking fly. And we also had a vending machine behind the show that sold little plastic flies in a plastic bubble with a piece of paper with the fly's individual name, favorite smell, and favorite pastime on it. And we sold those for $2. We made a fair bit of money.
Got the merch sorted.
Yeah. And so I'm like, well, I can deal with festivals now because I'll just be like a conceptual artist. I'll just create these comic modules that you can produce, and I don't even have to be there. Like, it was nice that you invited me and I enjoyed being there, but I could send that script to anybody, and they could just get two locals to do it, and they would put their own flavor into it, and it would still be a thing, and it would be my thing. I authored it, so you would pay me something, but you wouldn't necessarily have to pay me as much as it costs to fly me there and put me up in a hotel. And you could
So
use,
you're creating the concepts. You
yeah,
create the concept of the process, and then deliver that to the performer.
yeah, and that's part of. So yeah, we'll get back to that because we're on like 2 hours 21 minutes. I want to finish by like 45 because we'll exhaust people. So then I started thinking and doing a lot more conceptual stuff. Then, you know, I'd hung outside a building at the opening of a nightclub in this costume that had lots of bits of cassette tape hanging off me. And it was, I'd used a hang gliding harness, and I had like a certified rigger and everything. It was all like, I'm into standards and practices because the last thing I want is to do these absurd things and kill somebody or myself, you know. And so I had given that idea to the dung beetle, to John Elliott. And so then the next year at Edmonton, him and his partner, Annie, hung off a building in tandem, and they were art critics. No, they were fashion critics. And they would just look at passers-by, scribble things down on a notepad, rip the page off, scrunch it up and throw it at the person. And it might say something like, "I like your shoes," or something like that, you know. They were just hung there throwing fashion advice to people. And so that's...
And so they wouldn't speak. It wasn't oratory. It was literally just the throwing, and then people could open and...
Yeah. And then the other thing that I gave them was originally Rob and I in New Zealand created pedestrian cross theatre, where you just do like a 10-second thing in the middle of a pedestrian cross when the buzzer goes. And he had actually gone to Tokyo and nearly got arrested doing it in the biggest intersection on the planet in Tokyo. And they pulled him into the police station or whatever, and he goes, "Oh," and they go, "That's illegal." And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, we do it at home." And so I gave John Elliott that impulse. And then the third year he did pedestrian cross theatre. And he did like 4 different treatments of pedestrian cross theatre. The best one being Moses the Crossing Guard, which was just fucking hilarious, where he had 4 people and lots of 2 with cloth that would run out. 2 would run out with the cloth and 2 would stay there and wave it like the sea. And he'd be standing there dressed as Moses with a big staff. And all these people are waiting to cross the road. And he'd go, "Wait, wait, wait." And then he'd bang the staff and the water would cross. And he'd go, "Come, my people." And he'd fucking help all these people cross the road.
And is this for fun? Is this, what's the...
No, that was that was part of the festival.
Okay, I understand, yes.
So
the festival's paid for you to be this kind of interesting experience as people are crossing the road.
Yeah. Like comic installations. And so realizing that, again, as a clown teacher and as someone who's been a clown for a long time, as far as management of festivals are concerned, they're open to anything that's entertaining. They just want entertaining things. Thank you very much. And what you're doing is going, well, it seems like a very permissive environment. So can we do this? And they go, "Yeah, you can do that. You know, Can I be a dung beetle? Sure, you can be a dung beetle. Can I be Moses the crossing guard? Yeah, you can be. Can I hang from a building and be a fashion consultant? Let me think. Yeah, you can do that as well. And so I've got lots of these things all written down, and if I could fucking share it, I would. But
well, we can share after. We'll have an opportunity after. Don't worry about that. Yeah.
So
we can do a companion to the video.
So yeah, I go quickly. So then I ended up marrying this woman, living in Connecticut for 6 years, not leaving that often, doing Canada, and then I moved from. But I did a lot of American stuff. I did New Orleans. I did Mardi Gras. I did Renaissance Festival, like every year for like 6 years or something. I worked in LA, Vegas, New York. Did a lot of work in New York. Passed a Cirque du Soleil audition. Started with 58 people, finished with 8 over 2 days as the only clown that got through. And then I turned them down. Which brings us back to saying no is better than saying yes sometimes. And then I was in Hawaii where I got diagnosed, and then I came back here to die, and then I didn't die. And so now I'm having to reinvent myself, and that was too hard for a year and a half. So I just stayed in my room going, I don't know. And then the world kind of fell apart, and everyone had to go to their rooms. And
so are we on the note we talked about? Are we on this note we talked about before the video, where we said, what can we do in the future? How can we progress together coming out of this?
Yeah. So everyone's running to do online stuff. There's a big vacuum that's been formed, and people are throwing their imaginations into the vacuum, which is great. It kind of reminds me of the 90s in terms of the internet when it first started, and people were having little ideas about how it could be used and making lots of money really quickly if they were the first to market with these ideas, like eBay,
Facebook,
eBay's just an online marketplace. That's all it is, and that's worth billions. But yeah, and so now we're being forced to throw our imaginations into this vacuum because live entertainment is being put on a life support at the moment, if that. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of it. Everyone's webcasting at the moment, and I've got lots of links for that I can share. Like there's I like Stuart Lee. I think he's great.
Me too.
He's got he's on a regular online chat thing with 2 of his friends at the moment that I look at. And Ricky Lee Jones, a musician who I really like. This Friday, she's on Facebook at her place doing a free concert. Everyone's rushing into this vacuum, which I think is really, really interesting. Well, what's going to happen, unfortunately? Well, I think unfortunately, because I like the swashbuckling cowboy type, what you're doing, just sticking things together on cheap software and da-da-da. But what's going to happen is someone's going to pre-package everything like Zoom's attempting to do and make it a one-stop shop and try to monopolize it. But which is the same as what the cloud gives you certain advantages if you're stupid enough to leave your hard drive in the rain. But it's just a way of disempowering you as well. Because if you actually kept it on your hard drive, it would always be there and you wouldn't have to pay to upkeep it the same way you do with a subscription model You know, the cloud is just another form of digital tax. That's the same way that the whole suite of things from
Adobe.
Adobe is just a
Yeah.
digital tax. You know, where you used to own the software, now you just pay for access to it.
So some of us used to own the software, some of us didn't.
Yeah, I never owned it. I stole everything I ever had.
It used to be a
Unless,
lot easier.
unless unless I, you know, I buy things from people that I want to support. You know, um, you've got a Patreon account. I've got a Patreon account. Um,
Have we lost
Having
you,
said
Martin?
that, I'm
Oh no, you're
here.
back. Okay. Yeah, cool, man. You froze for a second, but I'm back
Yeah,
with you.
I have a Patreon account, but I only have one patron for $10 a month. I suspect I know who it is too. Um, Love you. Uh, but yeah, I was going to dump all these things as I was talking because I have examples of like amazing street performers who were like really unusual. Have you ever heard of Corpus?
No.
They're a French dance group who do street shows where they pretend that they're Canadian uh, Air Force display teams with their hands out, and they do like they're fucking hilarious. And they
Just
also
silly
pretend,
play.
yeah, they're brilliant, but it's like a form of dance. It's all, and then they get an audience member out to be a plane with them, and they do a thing where they dress up in sheep costumes and pretend to be a herd of sheep with a shepherd and a wolf, and do this whole story where, and they're sheep for ages, and they do it on real grass, and they eat grass, and they've got these sheep costumes, and they're really good at being sheep. And the so I've got videos of them that I wanted to share because they're examples of like these conceptual installative stuff that is just, that's where festivals can go. And also my thought process was, before this virus happened, my thought process was that air travel was going to get more expensive as climate change factored into the cost of air travel. And therefore, the whole modular idea of performance would be that me and some good friends scattered around the world and locally could be like a conceptual think tank, because we've been doing this for 30 years and it's not just the ravings of a teenager, and there's not much difference, to be honest, except we've got lineage.
Experience.
And we can, we've got all these installations, and you can have them. We'll give them to you for the cost of what it costs us to live, because whatever, we'll work something out.
So it's like a concept shop.
Yeah, like a concept shop. And then you because people are flying less, you can produce them using local actors, and they learn more, and they get an impulse to work with, and another one, like some of them are really simple. One that I wanted to do was to string, just out of earshot, lots of guitarists, acoustic guitarists on the street, and they've got phones. They're connected by phone, so that they're using the same metronome, and they're playing the same song, so that someone walking down the street passes someone playing a song and then keeps walking, that song disappears, and then this other person's playing exactly the same fucking song, as if they were the original person. And then further on, they meet another one who's playing the same fucking song, and it's like,
Kind
this,
of invasion of the body snatchers kind of
yeah,
thing.
it's just doing my head in. Like it's a way to make that tired Dylan cover fresh again. It's just like, for these people are all playing the same song at the same time, but they're all out of earshot of each other, so that a pedestrian would just give them this
But I like
weird
the idea
little.
of that weird paranoia of what the f- is happening here? Why is this like this? Is it me? Am I imagining
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've got various things, and they've all written down. They're already online. I've got a website for it, and I'm and
It says if you'd
there's
like
all
to see the
my ideas.
website after, I will put it in the comments after the
Yeah,
video. So if you stick
oh,
around after the video is done, you want to get all this stuff, it will be there.
it's just a blog, and I will put everything because I was gonna mention that we're having this nice little conversation, but like contextually also like every 2 minutes and 11 seconds where you are in the UK, someone is fucking dying. Like every
Oh,
2 minutes, 11 seconds,
yeah.
someone is doing their last fucking breath. And in America, every 50 seconds, someone is fucking dying. And it's like, these are weird times. These are really weird times. And, let's have a laugh. it's terrible. It's terrible that we should even like think about humor at this point, but we have to because we're the only people really qualified to to be improvisational enough to deal with this vacuum that we're given, and because and that's it. It's just because you see all these people like Colbert and various people, all these people whose big TV productions are now reduced to a room of their house. And they're not that funny. They're not that funny. They're pretty funny. They deserve their jobs, but they're not that funny. Like when you
They
take
need the adornment.
when you take their prepaid audiences where their audiences aren't paid, but when you take their audiences away and you take everything away from them, they're pretty naked when it comes down to it. And naked's something that street performers do really well because it's part of our DNA to just to to start from that. That's where we start from. We start from that, and then we build on that. And like every time we do that, so we're really well qualified to jump into this vacuum. And I'm really glad that people are jumping into it. I've got a list of those people. Uh, Kate Moyer's doing it. Shep Huntley's got it, his own little bubble show. Um, Daniel Odica and Rani Hazar are a couple, and they're doing really good stuff in Australia. You got World Buskers United who are doing their first show this 25th.
This weekend.
You've got, I've got a link for Stuart Lee. I was going to talk about Ed the Happy Clown. I was going to talk about Corpus. And yeah, I'll put links up to Panto Domestic and Vastly Immaterial, which are
Well,
my.
Martin, we can have you on again. If you'd like to come on again, by all means, you can come on again and we can talk about some other stuff. So you don't feel like everything has to be condensed into one.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, so what I'm doing at the moment is I've got whimsymodules.com, and I haven't published it. I'm working on it at the moment. I do have a blog that where I write about it, and that's already online. I'll leave a link so that people can look at that and see. Because I'm really, I waffle a bit. I'm like a dollar store Russell Brown.
Well, I've enjoyed hearing you waffle along.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as verbose as him, and I'm certainly not as sober, and I'm not as pious. So I've got Whimsy modules, which I'm working on, and then the other project I've got, and this has all happened in the last month or so. And then the other project is that I've just taken custody of the Buskers Hall of Fame YouTube channel, and I haven't done anything with it yet. I'm working on paper at the moment. I'm just doing frameworks for how I'm going to collate it, curate it. But again, I've got lots of links to videos, and I'm going to completely revamp it. And it's going to be a place where I put like the edited versions of these conversations that you're having with people. That's going to have its own category. I'm going to have historical categories, 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, whatever. I'm going to have eccentrics, and I keep a catalogue of them. I'm just going to try to make it, it's got between 40 and 50 things on it now. And it's no one's touched it for years.
No, it's a bit sparse, and we don't have that. We don't have a focal point.
Yeah,
for our community.
I'd like to make it a focal point. I don't want to monetize anything on it. It's just going to be a repository for people to do research or casting or whatever they want to do, and
also for the public to see, to come and look at our art form and have a good representation of it. I think we do as street performers struggle with representation in the broad public sometimes, you know?
Yeah. They're my two projects that I'll be working on, because I'd very much like to have the world give me permission to just produce some really strange things that I know are funny, because that's the other thing. You test it for 30 years, and you know intrinsically, granularly, almost molecularly, what's funny and what isn't.
You get a sense and a feel for it.
Yeah. And so then you'll have an idea, and it's a fucking absurd idea. But you go, that'd be funny. And to be given that role as a human being, to go, that'd be funny. And to articulate that idea, and then to produce remotely, or if they want to fly me over, whatever. But or to produce that idea and make that idea actually happen, like two businessmen competitively catching flies with the fucking fly swat. That's weird. It's happened. It
doesn't sound funny. Just to say it out, it doesn't sound funny. But then if you've got a sense and know of performance, you understand the mechanics of it, you understand how it'll play out, then it is funny.
It's funny. Yeah. Everything Living Space does is funny.
I agree. One of my favorite acts in the world.
Simply because he's gone, that'd be funny, and then he does it, and it's funny because he employ, he's got good comic timing, and he's got there's all these other things that go to it. Like the two guys that did the fly fishing, which is what we called the fly thing, were really already consummate performers and comedians. They just used my framework and created more comedy inside it as well. And
I think it's so important, isn't it, to have the people delivering the work understand the minutiae subconsciously of what they're doing.
Yeah,
not even necessarily routine, but the function of it. The way the crowd works, the way.
Yeah, and the sort of the good thing about the street-based performer is that they can deal with vacuums really well, like that crowd building thing where you just stand there and you're just like, and you know what you're doing, nobody else does, and it doesn't matter. And that unhurried, unpressured, just calm, not being stressed by insecurity, not having to rush and go, oh, come here. None of that, just that slow thing is something that no one else does as well as we do. Like, imagine there have been some stand-up comedians who explore it a little bit, but imagine going out there and not saying anything for 5 minutes and still getting laughs without getting too panto. Just going out there and just letting it build and being and not losing them. Like not only, but street performers are already qualified to do that because there are skills that we learn that no one else has to. And
I suppose this is a finisher point by all means.
Yeah, why not?
So this seems like a natural point to have a big finishing point for younger people who are watching who are learning. Do you have any
pressure to perform? There has to be a big thing now.
Not a big thing, but if people are learning and they're trying to gather skills and trying to be a good street performer or be a good street entertainer, street artist, what would you say to them?
I can give up now. Before it's too late.
Abandon hope, ye.
Well, first, that's kind of presuming that street theatre is going to exist in any recognizable form for the immediate and intermediate future. If you want to be a performer, bear in mind that you might get famous off a 5 to 20 second thing that goes viral. But once you do that, you're going to be on a treadmill that isn't of your own making for the rest of your life, if that's what you want to do, and it's gonna eat you up. Try to find out. I think the biggest bit of advice that I've ever had, that I've ever applied, that anyone else could do the same thing is don't start off with a don't. That's negative. And keep yourself entertained. Your primary responsibility as an artist is to keep yourself entertained. If you try to entertain other people, you'll make more money as a sex worker, honestly. And you are a sex worker of sorts anyway. You're just letting them fuck you. If you can do something if you can find something that entertains you, then you are a truly gifted individual, and you need to foster that flame, whatever it is, because that's the only thing that's going to give you the quality of happiness. If you want to be a performer, I mean, if you want to be a doctor, be a doctor. You're going to save people's lives, la la la. I'm not saying it's the most amazing thing that you could possibly be, but if you want to be a performer, find the thing that entertains you, and that's your kindling, and just keep giving it energy, because at the end of the day, it's going to be okay because you're entertaining yourself. And bear in mind, if you're an impatient teenager, it's going to take you a couple of years before anyone even notices you or thinks you're anything worth watching. And that might be unjust. You might be a genius at 17. The odds are against you, but you might be. But either way, it's going to take a couple of years before anyone notices you enough to go, I'm going to share that with my friend. And then once that happens, then and then you've got an audience, and then you've stayed true to yourself. You haven't run around just trying to get noticed. And then there's no better feeling than to walk away from a performance and just go, they just like me. You know, without having to have thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or oh, I have to do that again. Or like you get the phone call, you've got this gig, and you're just like, I wish they just post me the money. You know, like here's your opportunity. Like they will just post you the money. No one's leaving home for a while. So find the thing that you like doing. You know, attractive little pubescents playing their ukuleles are making more than the, you know, a butcher or a baker or a cabinet maker, whatever. It's just like find
Or
what you want to do.
doctors sometimes.
Yeah, it's like the land rush of the 1900s in America. Only the thing about the digital real estate is that it's by nature infinite. So there's infinite real estate there. You know, if you want to do things online, if you want to do things offline, sorry, you're not allowed to right at the moment, but there's no stopping you planning ahead. And find old, crusty, generous people. That's how I got my beginnings. Well, that guy gave me his airfare because I asked for it. What are you doing next week? I'm going to Japan. Oh, you know that thing about going to Japan? Can I have an airfare? Okay. You know, ask for things. And online, that's where Patreon comes in. You can just ask and people will give. I mean, I'm not going to pull the cancer card again. Unfortunately, I can't. Well, I could. I could have cancer every 3 years for the next 9 years. But, you know, I made more money with cancer than I ever had as a street performer.
So there's some advice that people can take away from here. If you want to be a successful street performer, get a tumour.
Yeah, get a tumour. Cancer is lovely. It's a very personal thing. You know, it's yours. You don't have to share it. Get you lots of attention. Get you lots of attention. Everyone's like, you know, they give you, if you're lucky, you get some good drugs out of it. And we all die anyway. So on that note,
so I think, yeah, that's a natural time to end there, isn't it, Martin? Thank you for being here.
No worries.
Thank you for chatting. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Okay. And you.
Please stay on the line. I'll have a chat with you after the video ends. Would you like to give any last notes?
No, I'm done. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. I feel like I could have been better, but I did what I did. Okay. See ya.
You were an absolute pleasure. Stay on the line 2 seconds. I'll chat with you after. But everybody, goodbye, 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 goodbye.